Welcome to the 451st episode of the Jami Dulaney Plant-Based Wellness Podcast. My name is Jami Dulaney, and I'm your host. I'm a plant-based cardiologist and endurance athlete living in Southwest Florida. Welcome and thanks for listening. Well, it's been about 10 days since the last podcast because I finally put a 50K in the books. Michael and I traveled to Austin, Texas, actually a little bit northwest, to run the Austin Rattler Run 50K. And it was put on by the Leadville Race Series. And one of the reasons that we chose this race is because winning your age group would get you a coin into the Leadville 100 trail race in Colorado in August. And that's the one I have talked about and panicked about over the last several months, or I guess probably last couple of years since we got hooked on Leadville, or Leadville found us. But this is a qualifying race. We were going to do a swim run in Austin, but the river is down, and timing was such that this race made a little bit more sense. So didn't have to swim, just had to run 30 miles, 31 miles or so. Actually, it was more like 30 miles because the loops were just 10-mile loops. It was at a ranch called the Reveille Peak Ranch, which is a privately owned ranch that they rent out for Spartan-like races, corporate retreats, team building adventures. There is, as I'll talk a little bit about, a shooting range there. But this race was running and mountain bike racing. And it was more of a mountain bike race than the runners. There was more mountain bike racers. There were 281 mountain bike racers racing the 60-mile loop, 60 mountain bike racers racing a 40-mile loop or a 40-mile course, but only, and then 73 mountain bikers that raced a 20-mile loop. And there were 242 runners that raced a 50K, 30 that raced a 20-mile, and 86 that raced a 10-mile. So in total, there were 414 mountain bikers and 358 runners. And this is important because this ranch was, I think, 1,300 acres, and we were all on the course at the same time. So they did a really good job at the beginning and at the end. The bikers and runners shared a same Jeep road for probably not even a half a mile. And then the runners kind of looped inside the perimeter and zigzagged and did some, zigzagging inside the perimeter where the mountain bikers did the outside and would go around the zigzaggy areas. So you could see the bikers once in a while, but the 50K started first, and then a half hour later, the bikers went off in waves, and then they did the 20-mile runners and the 10-mile runners. So it was spaced out, but it was also such that once everybody was on the course, you could see the bikers and hear them zoom by on the other side of basically a tape, so to speak. So, it was very well done as far as being able to, get all those people on the course at the same time. The other thing that was different on this race from our previous races is this was the only aid station was at the beginning of the race. So you would go through a loop and come to an aid station. So you came past the aid station twice, started out by the aid station, and it was predominantly self-supported. So we had made our own drop. We had a drop bag, and there was a communal area for people to put their drop bags, and that's basically where you put your gear. And we made Ziplocs with each of the loops in that, so you come by, go to your gear bag, pull out the Ziploc for that particular loop, refill your vest, go to the aid station and get water. We didn't get anything else for the most part at the aid station, and then go on your merry way. And so you had 10 miles while you're out there. You had to make sure you had enough of what you needed, and that doesn't always work out accordingly, as I'll talk about here in a little bit. This was also sort of my get back on the horse race. So when my mom passed, we obviously did not do the 100K race, and so this was the first race back. So I hadn't done a whole lot of long runs in between that time, obviously. And so this was, kind of get back at it. The excitement signing up for the race was that it was a Leadville qualifier, but I got to tell you, it was pretty much, let's just go ahead and do this race and get on with it, so to speak. I never thought about not racing. I never thought about not finishing. And I certainly wanted to kind of see where I was in my training for, the lead up and the lull and all that other kind of stuff. But didn't have much aspirations, and I didn't have a whole lot of motivation, you might say. The biggest motivator that I was going to get back to Texas to see Addie and Caleb, so that was the probably bigger motivator. If somebody said you don't have to run the race, you can just go to Houston and cancel it out, I might have done that, but deep down I knew that I needed to do the race. It's kind of interesting. I grew up as a golfer, probably said this on the podcast, and by the way, we're at 998,000 downloads, so you may be the 1 millionth downloader. Congratulations if you are. But I grew up as a golfer, and I golfed with my dad, and then as a family we went on trips. My mom didn't take up golfing until her late 40s. So we would do a lot of family vacations centered around golfing. And once I had Addie and I moved to Florida, things, being how they are, starting in practice and a business, I started running because you could run quick. And then the marathons kind of started coming in, and I never picked up a golf club after I moved to Florida for the most part. And it was kind of funny because I always wanted to move to Florida so I could golf a lot, and I never did. And I never have and never look back and don't really miss it at all. But my mom would always kind of in the background say, kind of wish that I would take it up, or had hopes that I would take it back up again later on in life. But I never really had that desire and completely lost it, you might say. But she understood that running became a huge stress reliever for me. Running is a place I can clear my head. Running is a place where I have ideas for the podcast. I have ideas for my practice. It clears my head. It helps me deal with all kinds of different things that is going on in my head. So it's been a huge part of my life, and I hope that it always will be. I am a huge advocate of being outside. I think that outside cures a lot of things that inside never would. So I was glad to get out and have the opportunity to do this 50K. I've stated before that, running has a lot to do with life, and ultra running certainly has a lot to do with life. You have to take it one step at a time, one foot in front of the other, one section of the course at a time. And in this stage of my life, that's exactly what I needed, and I kind of look forward to it. So I wanted to qualify for the Leadville 100 if I could, but the reality of it is this was probably more of a therapy run for me than anything else. So we took off on the 50K course, and it started out kind of on a red dirt road, so to speak, and then veered off into trails. And there was a little bit of everything. It was a great training run. It had some, mini Leadville type nuances, such as, running on curves, down rocks, some routes. There were open areas where you ran on the Jeep road. There were open areas where you kind of ran in a field that had been scraped down. So there were some routes and grass. You ran along a fence line. Like I said, you ran by the mountain bike people. We ran by some cows. You ran down at a limestone bend, like the creek bed. Probably at one point was a little lake, but you ran along the rocks in several locations, big old rocks that you kind of hop from rock to rock, which did slow you down. And then up some loose rock, and in and out of these curvy sections, which also can kind of slow you down. A lot of it was actually exposed, and it did get warm pretty quick. It started out in the 50s. I think it got into the low 80s. Some of it was open but tree covered a little bit. Some of it was in the trees probably less covered than not. So there was a bit of exposure. But, nothing like Florida as far as heat goes. And it was kind of funny. Again, you'd think I'd learn, but I never seemed to. It used to be when I was running marathons, you run for a goal time, and that seemed to backfire. And in ultras, for the most part, I don't run for a goal time. I just try to run a good race. But this time, with the Leadville qualifier, I got in my head I was going to run for a time, which was probably a mistake because went out a little harder than I should have. My heart rate got a little higher than it should have early on in the first loop. I was taking in the electrolyte solution, Gnarly, which is a sugar and electrolyte drink mix. I had a lemonade one and a limeade one and a cherry Coke flavored one. And I had some goo. So the idea was 2 goos, a bar, and the drink mix would be calories, and water in a vest and a hydration bladder that I carried in a vest. And so I didn't want to have a lot of water to carry in, the heaviness, so did about probably a third full, fourth, maybe a half full of water in the bladder. And I drank some water, but I was drinking more of the electrolyte solution. So again, I went out a little fast, heart rate got a little high, burning a little bit more fuel than I thought I did, and started to actually feel the effects of running in my quads way earlier than I would have liked to. So about mile 8 or 9, the brakes started to come on, and my legs were starting to get a little achy, and it's like, oh, this is a little bit early for this. And I kind of think I got a little behind on my calories, because if your heart rate's up, you're burning more sugar than you are fat. And so my heart rate was up, and I was burning through calories. The other thing I wasn't doing was taking in enough water. So I tried to up the calories a little bit. We came around mile 10, and I got my bag, my Ziploc bag full of my 2 gels, a bar, and the Gnarly, and filled my Gnarly bottles up with water at the aid station, but I didn't fill the bladder up at the aid station. And it was because I forgot. And I'm trying to get through the aid station quickly. And that came back to bite me. At about halfway through the second loop, I ran out of water. And so now I'm thinking, I'm thirsty. I'm tired of drinking this sweet, concentrated stuff. And it was getting a little nauseating. The heat was going up and just wasn't feeling it. But was plugging along. Never did I think I wasn't going to make it. Never, I kind of came to terms with, it's going to hurt. It's supposed to hurt. We're doing a long race, but it's not hurting that bad. And frankly, I don't really care that it is hurting, because that's just what I'm here for. And, worked my way through the second loop, and was very glad to get to the back to the start line to do the third loops. And at that point, I had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in my drop bag. I grabbed that, and when I went to the aid station, I filled my bladder up halfway again, because I got a full Coke from the aid station. So I had 12 ounces of Coca-Cola, 2 14-ounce bottles, and then my bladder half full. So I actually walked in the beginning of that third loop trying to eat that peanut butter and jelly sandwich and drink a Coke. And the Coke, again, I've said it before, it's like rocket fuel for me. It really perks me up. And it's the only time I ever drink a Coke is during an ultra. And it's the only time I ever eat peanut butters during an ultra. But the peanut butter was too thick on the bread, and my mouth was too dry, and it was kind of sticking, and it was just hard to get down as well. So I ate about half of that sandwich and about 3/4 of the Coca-Cola, put the Coke can in my vest and carried it for the rest of the course, and carried the rest of that peanut butter and jelly sandwich for the rest of the course. And just kind of did one foot in front of the other and ran out of water again. Probably at about, I had about 3 or 4 miles to go this time. I had more than I had the last time, but I had 3 or 4 miles where I had to suck it up and drink my Gnarly concentrated mix as my fluid. So I was a little nauseated, with just kind of all that concentrate and the heat, and really wanted something more savory, which I wish I would have had, but, I didn't. So, note to self, plan accordingly. Michael and I split up about mile 17, so I was, happened to watch the trail for myself, be a big girl. And so I saw a couple guys up in front of me, and it was kind of reassuring that there was a couple guys and a couple girls in front of me, so I kind of was staying on course, because it was, like I said, a little bit zigzaggy, and I didn't want to get off course, and a few people did. But I was kind of following the two guys and the two girls, and I gradually caught them and passed the guys, and there was one girl and I that kept zigzagging back and forth. And, near the end, I'm kind of looking around, and I hadn't seen anybody my age really all day, or what I assumed was my age, no other mom appearing people running that I could see that looked as old as I was. So that was kind of good. I thought, well, I'm not having the time that I want, but I don't. It doesn't seem like there's too many people out here my age. In fact, out of the 252 people that got to the start line, 45 were women, so there weren't that many women. Probably the biggest age group category was in the 40s type range. So, as I was coming in, the girl that was kind of zigzagging with me, she passed me, and I kind of giggled to myself. I was, it's like, well, there's no real reason to go ahead and chase her, because she's a lot younger than me, so, she's not gonna win my age group. So, this probably wasn't a really good way to look at things. Michael and I have had this discussion before. I'm satisfied with, doing good for my age. He looks more at the total race. I guess I should look more at, the overall women's standing a little bit, or go for it, or, try to punch it a little bit more at the end. But, that's a takeaway that I need to have, I guess. But nevertheless, I won my age group. And so that really was all that mattered at the end of the day. I finished 38th overall, or in the women, 38 women, and my time was 7 hours and 29 minutes. So the pace started out okay at 12:22 per minute mile, dropped down to 13:31, and averaged 14:27 for the full distance. So it got pretty slow at the overall at the end to bring my total time down. But the lesson learned was went out a little too fast, got my heart rate up, didn't have the water. The other thing that slows you down, it sounds ridiculously slow compared to road racing, but what happens when you're on a trail is, again, it's not a straight line like you are in a road race for the most part. You're going around little hairpin turns, or going up and down rocks, big rocks, little rocks, slows you down, downhill, uphill, loose footing, and so forth. So and even just being on softer surface, you don't have the push off that you do on a road. So you automatically slow down some, or a lot. But nevertheless, got the job done and earned a coin to the Leadville 100-mile trail race that will be August 18 of 2024. So get ready. I really never switched it into high gear at the end, so I finished the race with some stuff in the tank. Whether that's good or not, it is what it is, because we're back training, because we have the 100-mile race in January 11th, which is not that far away. So I'm just kind of glad that I didn't leave everything out there. On the other hand, when I looked at the 50 age group, 50 to 59, there were several people that would have cleaned my clock. I think 7 out of the 8 people in the 50th groups would have cleaned my clock at the pace that I ran. Luckily for me, they're in their early 50s, so they've got some aging to do before they get into my age group, at least for that race. But nevertheless, I need to work on developing a third gear or high gear in some of these races. I have a feeling it might be going to happen here in the near future. So I learned you need more water in your bladder in your vest bladder, not your bladder, but your vest bladder, if you're going to do a 10-mile run. So that was a mistake, that I needed to have more water and water left over as opposed to not enough water. Need to bump my calories if I'm going to bump my heart rate up, that's for sure. And, perhaps not have a time goal so much for some of these races as much as a performance goal and play it by end. I think that things worked out better for me when I did the Leadville race because I ran scared and I ran aid station to aid station on time that I needed to be as opposed to running for a specific time. But there's a lot of that stuff that needs to be worked out. The beauty of these races is they're all unique, they're all different, they're all challenging. You spend a lot of time looking where to go, looking for the flags to not make the wrong turn, managing hydration and nutrition, because when you're looking at the flags, you forget to eat and drink. Knowing when you can eat and drink. If you're going down some technical course, it's hard to get a gel out or eat. So all of this is a learning experience that we're still learning. And the other thing is what a very infamous ultra runner, Courtney DeWalter, talks about is the pain cave. And realizing that an ultra distance, it hurts for everybody. It's going to hurt. There's achiness, there's discomfort, things don't go right. You have to troubleshoot along the way, which is a tremendous amount like life. There are rocky patches that we all have to get through, and one step at a time, one section at a time is basically the best way to get through it. Being out there in the middle of nowhere on this ranch, again, it was, meditative, so to speak, pushing through. Sometimes you feel like you're in a little bit of a slow motion in the process after you going through a grief after losing someone. And so the ultra marathon was great. It slowed things down one step at a time and let me push through some of the clouds back into the sunshine. So overall, it was a bit of a confidence booster that could kind of push through some difficult times, and even though it hurts, it's going to be okay in the long run. The funny thing that happened during the ultra marathon is that shooting range that I talked about earlier. When the sun came up, all of a sudden the gunshots started to become very clear and very frequent. And as an ex-hunter and range shooter, I could recognize different kinds of guns being fired, rifles, shotguns, and so forth. And it pretty much, there was shooting the whole time we were out there for, 5-6 hours. There was shooting going on. And when you got closer to the range, the noises got louder, and when you got further away, it started to kind of dissipate a little bit, but there were casings and shells all over the place. And, it was kind of the incentive to keep going for, it's like, well, I hope they know where they're shooting, and I hope there's not much in the way of stray gunfire going on here. So if I was ever going to run while being shot at, that was hopefully as close as I'll ever get to being near gunfire while I'm running a race. I said it earlier that I didn't really have any doubts that I wasn't going to be able to finish the 50K, and I'm pretty confident of a 50-miler, one foot in front of the other, but I don't have any confidence when it comes to the future of the next couple of races being 100-mile races. And so it is truly going to be new territory and one step at a time. And the preparation starts now, and the training starts now, and I can't put it off. I started planning on the airplane on the way back to Florida, our training schedule for the 100-miler that's coming up in January, and then after that, preparing for the mountains that we have to face in Leadville. To say that it'll be a challenge is a gross underrepresentation. There's not that many Floridians that care to go to altitude to run an ultra marathon. So at a disadvantage on that aspect of things. Age of people completing the Leadville 100-mile trail race is also sparse, to say. So I'm getting into the age category where people elect not to run anymore. And of course, put being a woman on top of all those three, even less women attempt the Leadville. at my age. So I think there were 1 or 2 finishers last year in Leadville, and probably not that many more, if any, on the long haul 100. So it's a big undertaking to have to take on, but I'm going to give it my best shot, and I'm going to keep training, and that'll be part of the podcast until you'll have to be bored with that until next year, that I'll update you on how things are going on this ultimate training for the goal race, the A race, next August of 2024. I believe my advantage, however, is my nutrition, because I believe plant-based nutrition is going to allow for good recovery and take me where I'm going for that part of the race. I don't think that you can age as easily not eating a plant-based diet. The inflammation associated with a standard American diet is certainly there. So I think that I have as an advantage. Also, I believe that I think I can figure out what I need to do for my nutrition. It's as if whether I can pay attention to it while I'm running probably be the biggest factor. So I have started making notes on plant-based foods, both sweet and savory, that I might like, that might work, and so we're going to have to test those. The other problem is that running in Florida in the heat, sometimes the savory things just aren't so good to look at, but I'm going to have to overcome that. The good advantage of the heat, though, is that it is somewhat of an altitude training because of the water loss that you associate with running in high humidity. So we'll see how it goes from there, and, can't wait to get started. My goal would be to get more plant-based ultra runners out on the course, and especially more plant-based ultra runners over 50 out on the course. If you know somebody that runs ultras, share this podcast with them so they can be plant-based and have a better chance at running. If you know somebody that's plant-based, then encourage them to start running, or increase their distance, because I do think trail running is a whole lot of fun. And it's just nice to be, there's just so much positivity and good energy out there on the course that, you're too old not to go on the trails. If you'd like to learn more about our practice and what we're up to, go on over to drdulaney.com, DoctorDulaney, and you can find out what we do in our practice. We have 3 different levels of membership. And one's dietitian, one is dietitian and counseling by myself, and one is a full medical membership. But we have a giant website over there for members only, and there's a lot on the website as well. So we'd love to have you as part of the practice. So if you have some interests, go over to the website. You can always email me at Jami, Jami, at drdulaney.com. Would love to hear from you. And thanks for downloading the podcast. I hope we're at 1 million. Share it with your friends. It's been a great ride. For the most part, I try to get a podcast out about every week from the get-go. There's been a few 10-day lapses, but for the most part, I always get that podcast out in less than 2 weeks. So thank you for listening. Thank you for all the loyal listeners. I know a lot of you expressed condolences to me about my mom. And, I listen to podcasts too, and you get to feel like you know people over time. That's exactly how we roll in our office and our practice. We like to get to know you. And so any email that you'd like to send me to say hi, I'd love to get to know you as well. So thanks for listening. See you next time.